Good to see you, everyone. My name is Robbie Howell. It is a beautiful August morning, and it is time for episode 3 of our Total Overhaul series. What the heck is Total Overhaul? I'll remind you of that in a moment. But today we will be focusing on progression, one of the most important axioms in all of strategy games, namely how the game evolves as you are playing, going typically from relatively low power at the beginning of the game to very high power by the end of the game. And we'll also be tackling a couple other topics as well, such as a new fourth resource and victory conditions, all of which I felt were reasonably well connected enough to land in this episode as well. Also, all of them are very good to note before diving into later parts of this series. As per usual, YouTube stuff, subscribe, Discord, Ko-Fi, whatever. An introduction for those of you who are not yet familiar with the Total Overhaul series. This is going to be talking about a hypothetical Total Overhaul mod of Age of Empires 2, where everything is different from the current game but is built using the current game's engine. I'll be tackling a different design element each video, and everything covered will be technically implementable in the current game via the Genie editor, but will be massive departures from current kind of AoE2 philosophy. And each video will end with wishful thinking, or rather each section of each video, outlining stuff that isn't feasible but that I'd love to see. Will a mod actually get made based on this? It's possible. We will see how it goes. But more importantly, this series is kind of a framing device for discussing the RTS genre. These sort of changes are not things I would necessarily want mandated upon AoE2, besides as like an alternate game mode. But I can't deny that AoE2 is moving in a direction I don't love. And as such, this series will be kind of outlining my ideal historical RTS through the lens of a theoretical AoE2 mod for context. I believe that RTS's decline is due to creative stagnation and dogmatic adherence to a rigid arcade-style framework. This is my attempt to shake things up and innovate. Please do comment your thoughts. Some of these ideas will be weird and unprecedented. I'd really love your opinions on them. I might not have time to reply, but I will be reading comments and taking notes. And many episodes such as this will include polls so you can help me resolve uncertainties. As a quick refresher, last episode we discussed movement. Very important in any real-time strategy game. I described the AoE2 engine as being amazing overall, but I had plenty of ideas on how to add to it. We also discussed line of sight, which I described as the most underrated mechanic in RTS. I had a lot of ideas on that topic. And then terrain was our final topic we covered, and it was pretty much just wishful thinking. But still important, and I was honestly pretty surprised how many of you liked the changes I discussed and wanted even more. Lastly, poll! Episode 4's topic will be revealed at the end of the video, as voted by you guys in the poll. I will say the poll was very close, so I took the runner-up. That's going to be locked in as episode 5. And I have another poll coming out this episode, so keep an eye out as you're watching, and make sure to vote once you have finished the video. Now, there's one other thing to describe, which is Enclave, my diceless tabletop role-playing game. It is on Kickstarter in pre-launch phase right now. Please go follow the pre-launch page. Enclave is a game I have been developing for a very long time. I care a lot about. And is what I would say I'm actually good at as a game developer. This RTS stuff is pure hobby land. So if you would like to support me in a more tangible way, and you want to see what it looks like when I'm actually doing something I'm really good at, go take a follow of Enclave, and please do back the project if it catches your interest down the line. Now, with all of that yapping out of the way, let us move on to the meat of the video. Progression, namely the way a game escalates and higher tier options are accessed as you play. So first order of business, progression systems. What options do we have? Now, I could think of kind of 4 main ones across strategy games, but I'm sure there's many more. The first being what I call the big button. Namely, you hit a button, often you spend a bunch of resources, and then you sometimes have to wait a bit, and then you reach the next tier. So it's kind of these like big thresholds. AoE2 is obviously an example of big button type progression in action. Next type of progression I could think of was incremental, where you gradually unlock higher tier stuff one by one, or like batch by creating buildings and researching technologies. StarCraft is a great example of this. Like each time you build a new building, it unlocks a couple new units, but there's not like a single big button you press to unlock a whole bunch of new stuff in most cases. Next is what I call strategic progression, where you control certain map nodes to access higher tier stuff in batches. Civilization is an example of this. You have to control strategic resources, or maybe they remove that in the recent ones. I don't know. I haven't played since Civilization 3. But from what I remember, you get access to certain units by controlling certain resource nodes on the map. And lastly, time. You just kind of wait, and higher tier stuff gradually unlocks. Now, admittedly, I cannot think of a game that, like, quite precisely does this, but I'm sure they exist. There's a lot that are close. Again, you could kind of argue Civ does, but that's researching technologies. That's a little different, even if it runs parallel to the rest of the game. So yeah, those are the 4 I could think of, but I'm sure there's more. Comment any that I missed, just like kind of talking grand scale, right? And if we want to be technical, right, AoE2 is not pure big button. It has elements of incremental as well. I would say it's kind of a combination of big button and incremental, especially big button. The question I'd like to pose to you is AoE2 style aging up the best system? Like I said, it's mostly big button. It's easy, it's accessible, it's a tried and true classic. But I'm not personally convinced it's best as is. A blend of all of the above seems cleaner to me. Or if not cleaner, it seems more engaging to me. Yeah, cleaner is not the right word. I think still kind of focusing on big button and incremental progression is a good idea. Those seem the easiest to balance. But throwing in the other two maybe to some degree could help, especially strategic. I think having a little more strategic progression would be really cool, though it would require map design and map generation to be made more consistent in order to make sure someone doesn't get screwed over. I have ideas for this, future episode. The trade-off between kind of production and progression in particular is very punishing and counterintuitive for new players. And by that I mean, when you click up an age, you can't train vills. Does that add like some nuance and strategy to it? Yes, it does. And I don't hate it, right? But I'm not convinced it's best, is what I'm saying. And I think I'm going to propose an alternative that I think is hopefully going to be more compelling to you guys. More importantly, however, a lot of aging up, especially early game, feels like busy work. I pose to you the question, is Dark Age really necessary? Regardless of system, there's one maxim I insist on following in game design. Don't waste players' time. Long games can be fun. I really like some long games, but you want to shoot for something more concise for average 1v1 play. Something I've learned from my work with Enclave, link down below, is you really want to minimize downtime. You want to drop players straight into the action. This is something that tabletop role-playing games suffer from tremendously, and Enclave solves in a big way. And I think that we can apply a lot of that same logic to real-time strategy games too. And as such, I make the following claim. Dark Age, in AoE2, as it is now, is stupid and should not exist. It is boring, it's nearly identical every game, and it is a huge skill check for people without incredible micro. Dark Age is one of those things that makes or breaks the rest of the game. One little micro fuck-up in Dark Age is going to impact your entire remaining game. And that sucks, especially because it's boring. Dark Age is consistently a slog that you need to get through to actually reach the fun part. And that, to me, is crappy game design. While Empire Wars was a flawed game mode, since AoE2 isn't balanced around it at all, I think it has the right idea. I actually think Empire Wars is one of the best things that AoE2 has done in a long time. The Empire Wars start, where you have an actually developed town, bunch of villagers already working, you're in feudal age, all that. I believe that is the way RTSs should do early game. Let players do the fun stuff right away. Minimal faffing around. And also, since the villagers are already working, you don't have as much micro burden at the beginning of the game. I think that's tremendous. And I think that should be the default. And if not that, at the very least, just get rid of Dark Age. Dark Age is so stupid. Anyways, now that we've talked a bit about progression systems, let's talk about what's achievable to implement for them in this Total Overhaul series. First of all, only 3 ages, which I would call Dark Age, Silver Age, Golden Age. Now, right now, the way ages currently are set up, they have this kind of awkward, specific historical period, but also not sort of dynamic. This system that I have right here places the ages in-game as steps in a civilization's rise. No matter where they are in history, all great civilizations have had a Dark Age, a Silver Age of Ascendancy, and then a Golden Age of crowning triumph. Nice and simple. This would apply across all time frames universally. Now, the first age in my list, what's called Dark Age here, would combine what is currently Dark and Feudal Age, bypassing that dull 10 minutes of every game's beginning. And aging up would be handled almost solely by a new resource. We'll get to the specifics of that in the next section. But aging up would only cost this resource in very large quantities. And it's kind of a funky resource, so it means that you have to kind of go out of your way to get it. It's a very different kind of dynamic and way the game would be progressing. I make the claim that it would be better. And I'd love to hear what you think after you see the full plan. But finishing off what we have now, another achievable thing is to have more stuff be gated by things other than age, kind of using the incremental method I described earlier. This is a very kind of general, broad thing. I'd be getting to this more in future episodes, but I'd want more limitations similar to no bombards without chemistry. You know, you have to research like a technology to get this unit. You have to build a specific building to get access to this. Kind of like how a siege workshop cannot be built without a blacksmith. Again, specifics will come later, but that's just kind of an overall stated intention for my designs. Next, borderline, stuff that maybe could be done, but would be either really fussy in the current game, especially in the Genie, or is something that would be like likely that the game would introduce. First of all, aging up takes longer, but does not block a town center's production queue. I really don't like that you can't train villagers while you're aging up. Though I do have an idea to be mentioned in a future episode that might make this change like completely unnecessary. But so, take it with a pinch of salt. More importantly, I'd love if aging up could be building independent once clicked, so it isn't canceled if the source TC is destroyed. The idea that like you can be prevented from aging up by a building being destroyed feels very weird to me. I'd love if it, like, when you clicked it, it just kind of went to the high bar and it, like, lived in the high bar. Or even if you just had to click, like, that high bar to age up rather than clicking on it in a building. What do you guys think? Minor thought. Now, this kind of parallel production queue thing is doable in Age of Mythology. But I'm pretty sure it's not doable in AoE2 without serious fiddling. And so this is distinctly borderline. But there might be ways to cheat it. I don't know, like using a dummy unit or something like that. Sounds kind of cool to me. And if I'm honest, I'd kind of like to do this with all technologies, where all buildings have like a parallel production queue for building, for training units and for researching technologies, but have technologies take like way longer. I think that could be a cool dynamic. Makes a little more sense too. Are you telling me I cannot train archers while I am learning how to make crossbows? That's stupid. I don't understand. And the other thing I want to discuss in the borderline section is the Empire Wars start. Now, again, as described, both players already would have a robust little town, plenty of villagers already working, and maybe even different civilizations could have slightly different starts. I think that would be so cool. And I think it would be much better for the game. However, I have no idea how to implement this in a data mod. Frankly, I think it's probably impossible. But you could definitely do it in like a fixed scenario rather than a data mod. Next topic, culture. And what exactly is culture? It is my pick for the new fourth resource in AoE2. What the heck do you mean, Robbie? This is insane, Robbie. Yes, let's talk about it. First of all, why add culture? Culture is wildly important. AoE2, as has been lamented to me by friends who play other games who are trying to like collab with me or cross-play AoE2, is basically a military sim with like a token gesture towards economy. I think historical RTSs can be a lot more than this. I think we can do better than that. And culture is an extremely broad and largely intangible topic. You could rep it in a lot of ways, but I think this is best. It's similar to Civilization, which, at least for a few games there, did have culture as like a gatherable resource. And since culture is so broad and intangible, I think that like having it as like an acquired accumulated resource felt like the cleanest way to do it. It even makes sense for culture to be tradable in the diplomacy tab or bought at the market, because you have cultural exchange, cultural exports, and so I think it makes perfect sense as a resource. More importantly, culture better represents the idea of aging up, hence why it is the only resource you spend when you advance in age. If anything brings about a golden age or an ascendancy for civilization, it's their culture. Culture will be used for many other things besides aging up as well. I'll go over those in future episodes. But suffice to say, it's typically going to focus on stuff that makes a civilization pop and is unique. Lastly, stone is a dumb resource that should not exist. It's there so that you don't spam castles everywhere. That's I think, the reason why stone exists, to limit fortifications. But there are other, better ways to do that, I would argue, and we will get to those in future episodes. Stone mines can even still exist, but will work differently. Again, future episode. Probably next episode, actually. But most notably, why is stone so rare? Just pick up rocks. There's literally a cliff right there. It's brown rather than gray. So stupid. Anyways, culture is better. And also, best of all, culture is actually very implementable in the game. You can just change resources in the Genie editor. It's not that hard to do, from what I understand. Way easier than it sounds. More notably, we can even have culture be generated very atypically. Obviously, you don't have villagers going out to like culture nodes and gathering it. That would be ridiculous. So instead, all civilizations would have a tiny trickle of culture over time, just at base. Certain buildings, technologies, civ bonuses, and similar can increase this trickle under certain circumstances. And then regional groupings of civilizations will often, if not always, have special ways to get culture as well, with maybe some individual civilizations even having their own completely unique methods. And so because of this, culture is a resource of infrastructure. The more you are building up your empire, the more culture you will get, but it's hard to get it fast, and it is hard to get it in great lump sums, which is critical for reasons we will discuss later. And that's it. It's just easy to do. This is like the easiest section in the history of this series thus far, which is potentially surprising considering how like warping it seems to be. But it just happens to be something that the current engine can handle really well, and thank goodness for that. I think it's extremely important. But with that, let's go on to another extremely important topic: win conditions. Namely, how to make Conquest victory suck less. I think Conquest victory is boring, and I wish there were other ways you could win the game. So first of all, the issues with the current win conditions. Conquest, as mentioned, is boring and is the only one played. Period. Hey, can we turn on Wonder Victory? You'll be laughed out of the room, for good reason. Like I said, I get sick of Conquest every time. And the mode has its limitations. We all have some memory of some asshat walling in his last villager, and then it takes a fucking hour to finish the game, and blah blah blah. There's problems with it. It can be made more concise. It can be made more clean. Now, what about the other victory conditions? Wonders, how about those? They suck. They're just bad. They're too costly, they're too fragile, they're too slow, and they're no fun for either player. Have you guys ever had a situation where wonders worked as intended? Where you like built it up and then had a really tense defense of it, and then at the very last moment, that little timer ticked down and you won the game? Has anyone had that? If so, I'd love to hear. Relics! What about relics? They're tilty as shit. If you, like me, spent many of your formative years playing against relatively high-level AIs, you know how much they love gathering relics and doing a relic victory. So, first of all, relics require you to hard commit to monks, which suck. I hate monks. They're unfun to play with or against. See my video on them from a while back for some ideas on how to fix them. We'll be revisiting them in future. Additionally, relics are very dependent on map spawn. Good luck making good use of relics or a relic-based game plan if you get unlucky. That sucks. And also, relics I think are a cool idea. They're fun, they're interesting, and it's possible to do cool stuff with them even if they are not a win condition. I'll be talking about relics in future as well. So, in summary, we have Conquest, which is boring, Wonder Victory, which is bad, Relic Victory, which is bad, and we have King of the Hill. It's an alt game mode, and I will admit, it's really fun. It's the only fun alt game mode, I will say. Bold claim, perhaps. I think King of the Hill is really enjoyable, but it takes a very long time, and also the game isn't really designed around it. Plus, it's only really good in groups. Have you guys ever played a 1v1 King of the Hill? I don't think it's probably any good. So in summary, King of the Hill is kind of awesome, but has drawbacks and limitations. As for Wonder Race and Defend the Wonder, have you played these? I might have, like, once, maybe. I did a video talking about wonder bonuses where I talked about this a little bit. You can take a look at that up here. I did it with Admiral Wololo a little while back. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen these played. I think I saw like a video talking about the very niche wonder race community. You guys can tell me I'm wildly off base with this one. I don't think they're worth much. Now, that's the issues with the current win conditions. But why do I want to add multiple win conditions instead of just one? Well, one, multiple win cons add strategic depth to play. Instead of both players bashing their heads against the same problem, both have multiple routes they could take. It lets players misdirect which win con they're going for. Your opponent thinks you're doing one, secretly you're building towards another. That is cool. It lets you achieve information asymmetry, like I talked about in last episode. Additionally, it lets you put your opponent under multiple types of pressure. Let's say that you're going for 2 win cons at once. Suddenly, your opponent has like 2 different bases to cover, so to speak. They're like, where do I direct my attention? Once again, lets you misdirect people, as well as makes it so that you can really lock in a win. Plus makes those wins much more concise. No more walling in your last villager nonsense. Additionally, multiple win cons allow more gameplay diversity. It allows civilizations to have game plans beyond just build and destroy. And also, it lets games follow more unique trajectories. Like, you know how people love 8-player free-for-alls and they're, like, beloved because of how, like, wacky they can be and how many different ways they can go? Same thing. They have many unique trajectories to them. And I think that adding multiple win cons allows you to achieve a similar feel in 1v1 games. Lastly, it's more historically accurate, which is a priority for me, as you know. Not all civilizations became preeminent through war, and relatively few did so through war alone. Of course, war is going to be a factor in the equation for most of them, but it's not nearly as big a deal as a game like Age of Empires would make you think. This lets you represent other ways that a civilization can become dominant. Oh, but Robbie, alt victories are boring. It's just playing solitaire. You just commit to your one game plan and turtle up and blah, blah, blah. They don't have to be. I can agree that if you have alt victories that are like a game of solitaire where you're just doing your own game plan and your opponent has no form of counterplay, that could be bad. And we can watch out for that. We can keep an eye out for that. But I think alt victories are only a problem if there's not enough counterplay, which is the same with all win cons in all games. That is a given. So let's talk about what these alt victory conditions would actually look like. And unfortunately, they are all borderline. And frankly, this borderline assessment might be a little generous. My good modding friend, who is the consultant for this series, said that pretty much none of these could actually be implemented in a data mod, but all of them are abundantly doable in a scenario editor scenario. So maybe there's a way to reconcile it. Even so, I'm putting them in borderline for now. Firstly, you'd have the primary win con of destroying all enemy town centers, castles, and wonders. Big, prominent buildings. This is similar to AoE4, where it's like, what, landmarks and starting town center or something like that? I actually really like that system. It's one of the things I like most about AoE4, because it means that both players have a very specific, tangible goal when they are playing, and games don't drag, frankly, and I think that's nice. It means also that, like, if you're being destroyed everywhere, you can still, like, pull back and, like, whip together a last-minute backup town center. So there's still ways to, like, claw your way back into a game. I could maybe see a few other buildings besides town centers, castles, and wonders being added to this list down the line, but I'm far from sold on it. That's a solid maybe from me. I would still call this victory type Conquest. Nice and easy and clean. So that's the first victory condition. My guess is this will be the most common victory condition. Secondary victory condition, Dominion. Build and defend a wonder in the center of the map. All maps would have this like Dominion area in the middle. And if you built a wonder anywhere else, it would not initiate this win con. However, as I will get to in a future episode, wonders would be much more accessible in this hypothetical total overhaul mod, and they would have benefits even when not built in the middle of the map. So there's many reasons to build a wonder not in the middle, because you want its powerful benefit. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it takes a while to make, but it's not nearly as expensive or takes as long to make in this game mode as it would in the base game. Plus, I would have the win timer be faster. I even like the idea of kind of capturing a King of the Hill feel by making it so that attempts after the first have incrementally shorter timers. So let's say someone like goes for a Dominion victory, you destroy their wonder, and then you build their own. Your wonder would start at like a 20% shorter timer or something like that. It would have like a cap, right? Like you couldn't bring it too low, but I think that would be really fun and enable kind of a back and forth similar to a game of King of the Hill. And sounds like it would be especially fun in like big multiplayer games. There's many ways you could go about this. All I know is I really like this idea, even in 1v1 traditional gameplay. I will note I ripped this idea off completely, but lovingly, from the fantastic Empirecraft mod. I've done videos on this mod in the past. If you want to take a look, check up here. That'll show you what a full game of it looks like. Next, more Borderline stuff. The final victory condition, Hegemony. This would be a special technology available in Golden Age, costing a lot of culture. And this technology, which would be just called Cultural Hegemony, starts a victory timer, similar to a wonder timer when completed. And the technology would be quite fast research. It would be really expensive, pretty fast, kind of like spies, though not nearly as expensive. Other players would receive a notification when this happens. Player X has become the hegemon, and also would have that tech, Cultural Hegemony, enabled, even if they aren't yet in Golden Age themselves. Additionally, researching Cultural Hegemony increases all players' base culture trickles. Not by a lot, but by enough to be noticeable. So if you hold out, timer goes down, you win the game. Where's the counterplay? Here's the counterplay. Any other player who researches Cultural Hegemony will replace your timer with their own. And this is infinitely repeatable. You get the ability to research Cultural Hegemony again if this happens. So you just keep kind of ping-ponging this back and forth. However, each time any player researches Cultural Hegemony, the technology becomes significantly more expensive for everyone else map-wide. But also, each time you would kind of trade it back and forth, that timer would become a little bit shorter, maybe like 10% shorter, though it would have like a low cap or something like that. This way, the stakes increase each time you trade back Cultural Hegemony. It's more expensive to reclaim it, and that timer gets shorter and shorter, so you have less time to do it. Now, the trickle boost, however, would also stack, but not nearly enough to compensate like the increase in cost. You'd have to like be really trying to amp your culture if you were going for like a Cultural Hegemony battle. Now, I think this system is awesome. It represents cultures jockeying for position and trying to become preeminent within a region, which you see all across history. And it even reps how different cultural rises tend to mutually benefit their neighbors. Culture is like symbiotic and competitive. A rising tide raises all cultural ships and all that. And that's why everyone gets more culture as people are battling for cultural hegemony. I love this system. It is a way to enable more economically or culturally inclined civilizations to really have a chance at winning in a way that I think has abundant counterplay. And at the end of the day, even if you're going for a cultural victory, your opponent can still go for a Dominion victory or just smash your face in with a military, like a Conquest victory. All three of these work in tandem. And if you want to put on multiple types of pressure, for example, besieging your enemy's base for a Conquest victory and then also going for a cultural victory behind it, I think that's going to add not only a lot of strategic depth, but also be wildly more interesting to watch. I love this mechanic, and I think it could maybe work in the current Genie, but I think it would be wildly fussy to do, but very doable in Scenario Editor, so we'll see. Lastly, a couple things on WinCon tabled ideas. These are things I considered but kind of decided against. One, a population victory where you outnumber your opponent by like 10 times they lose. Pretty intuitive, kind of makes sense historically, but on the other hand, it's completely unnecessary. If this comes up, you're already winning. It's also very annoying to determine in games above 1v1. Like, how do you determine when someone has 10 times fewer population if there's like 8 people in the game? I don't know. Next, map control victory. If your buildings cover X percentage of the map, you win. Same problems as the above. You're already winning if this happens, probably, and it's annoying in big games. And it's a lot of micro. It's a lot of foundations to place. Trade victory. Take and hold control of all trade posts on the map to win. I don't hate this one, but I do think it's redundant. holding trade is already going to give you the win most of the time just because you are going to get access to resources. And so I don't think that the trade posts in and of themselves need to be a win condition, even if they enable a lot of win conditions. Yes, I do plan on adding neutral trade posts. That'll be covered in a future episode on map design. And before we end the episode, I've been talking a lot about some really weird things this one. Like this WinCon discussion, I think, changes Age of Empires more than pretty much anything else I've proposed. I'd like to hear what do you think. Do you have any ideas for WinCons not mentioned in this presentation? That's going to be one of the topics of our poll, which is linked down below, where you can give feedback both on that and also on this episode in general. If you have an idea inspired by or drawn from another game, please do specify which game. That would be very helpful. And bonus points if you can ground them in history. Like, I tried to make it so that my cultural hegemony thing is entirely historical in nature, and is extrapolable across many, if not all, ages of history. So bonus points if you can come up with a victory condition that does that too. I have been watching the comments closely in past videos. Many of you have had great ideas there and in the polls, and I have been taking notes on them wherever I possibly can. So thank you guys so much for doing so, and in a couple more episodes I'll likely do like a changes or retractions episode where I go over stuff you've changed my mind on or given me the ideas to add. But with that, we come to the end of this episode 3 of Total Overhaul. Join me next time for the winning topic of the last poll, resources, including trade goods, resource nodes, and much, much more. Now that we know what the 4th resource will be, culture, this episode will be a lot easier to do. Please do tell me what you think about this episode and Total Overhaul in general. Are you enjoying it? Are you not? Comment your thoughts, respond to the poll, and with luck I'll have out another episode this month, if not definitely in September. But until then, my name is Robbie Howell. Please make sure to check out Enclave, linked in the description below, and ciao for now.